Well, we're here in June 2019 with Michael Hesse, a 50-year member of the CYC. Michael, welcome. And how did sailing begin for you?
Oh, VJs at Vaucluse and Double Bay, and then moths at Double Bay, and then hanging around the CYC trying to get a ride to Hobart.
Well, how did that eventuate? I mean, you obviously were a youngster then. How did you get to do your first Hobart or be involved with the CYC? Actually, how did that come about?
Well, the CYC was a different club in those days. There was no floating marinas and things, and it was a much smaller club, and everybody knew everybody else. So you eventually sort of waited your turn until you got someone tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Time to go to Hobart, boy."
But didn't you have an interesting trip? You went to Hobart by not by yacht, but to try and get a ride back from Hobart.
I did that several times. Yeah, that was the usual way to sort of start the game, and I came back with 2 or 3 times. Yes.
But you had an interesting escapade going down one year, didn't you? Didn't you get Launceston waylaid you a little bit?
Oh, that's a story I'm not sure we want to talk about, Pete. I did. I hitchhiked down and we got to a spot of bother in Launceston, and the police very kindly drove us out of town and said, "Camp here, we don't want to see you again."
Keep going.
Yes.
And then you ran into an infamous character who I think you were at school with at Scots College here at Bellevue Hill, the infamous Nookie Bennett.
Nookie Bennett. He was on Caprice of Huon that year, and we sort of met up in Constitution Dock, but unfortunately he wasn't able to offer me a ride home.
He was a very affable fellow, Nookie. Not really.
Not.
But what are his immortal words to you? Is it?
Oh, I can't repeat exactly what he said, but he said, "I got him on my own steam, mate, and so you've better look after yourself."
Yes. And you came home that year on?
I came home that year on Birralee.
Right, small boat.
Small boat, yes.
Yeah.
It was famous for having a mast, an early aluminium mast made out of a lighting pole, which they'd sort of squashed into an oval shape.
And it obviously worked.
It was very stiff and heavy, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So then you got involved here at the CYC, meeting a lot of people and characters. And,
yes, indeed, yeah.
And then your first Hobart, let's talk about that.
That was 1967 on the dreaded Zilvergeest 1, which was a 29-foot plywood Van der Stadt design. No headroom, leaked like a sieve. I mean, they wouldn't let it out the heads these days, I don't think.
Well, I was thinking that would be, at the time, probably the smallest boat that ever went to Hobart.
Certainly was, yes. The second year we went down, I think Trig Halverson went down with John Robertson on a boat that was 29 feet long, but it had full headroom and toilets and the whole
Porsche.
thing. Porsche.
Yeah.
We had no headroom. We had tents over the quarter berths to keep the water off the berths, and we lay under space blankets to keep the rest of the spray that came down the hatchway off us.
Well, I remember the dreaded Z. It was moored right at the front of the CYC.
That's right.
And,
Isn't it some honour? Yes.
Yes, and lovely guy called Alan Murray.
Alan Murray, yes.
An architect.
Yeah, architect, yeah. He was the Scots rowing coach as well.
Right.
At school.
Right. But every weekend you'd come down, there was more tools and easy cork on that boat than you've ever seen in your life. They spent their life working on it, didn't they?
He was a fiddler, Alan, and he kept on trying to get the rating down. Not that it did much good because the boat was so slow anyway, but he added a layer of plywood over the whole deck, which was supposed to A, keep the water out, and B, reduce the rating, but didn't either.
But tell us about some of your breakfast on the dreaded Z. They were well known around the CYC.
Down below, there's no headroom, and you had to sort of change, squatting down, and there was only one bunk below, which was, apart from the quarter berths, there were 5 in the crew, so there wasn't much room. Anything that you wanted to keep dry, you had to put in a plastic bag, and the food was kept in a net hanging from the deck top. So all the tins and the heavy stuff were put in the bilge under the floorboards. And the first Hobart we did, we didn't think about the labels, and of course the labels all washed off. So we'd quite often have breakfast with something like cornflakes with beetroot. It was pretty basic stuff.
But I mean, you look back at it, I mean, it was wonderful times, really.
Fantastic.
I mean, you thought it was terrific.
It was
didn't
fantastic.
We? Yeah.
We were happy as Larry.
Yeah.
We never got to Hobart, I don't think, in time for New Year's Eve. And I remember some of the guys in the big boat saying to us, "You blokes must like sailing a lot because you spend a lot of time doing it."
Yeah, I mean, as I said, today you wouldn't contemplate going outside the heads, as you said,
No,
in
you
a boat
wouldn't go
like
outside,
that.
no,
Yeah. But
no.
you did 2 on the dreaded Z.
2 on the dreaded Z, and then a third one on Z2,
Right.
which was slightly more comfortable.
Salubrious, yeah.
Yes.
But after Hobart in '68. I think you ventured overseas. Is that right?
I went overseas. Bob Crichton Brown had chartered Flame, a new Nicholson 43, which is supposed to be a hot new thing to sail in Cowes Week and the Fastnet. So 2 of us from Zilvergeest went over to sail on that. Bob couldn't go in the end because he got bad cold. They wouldn't let him fly. So Norman Ridge took over the charter, and we had a great time. It was an introduction to the real world of sailing in Cowes and the Fastnet race.
And Billy Bold, a character around here, I think he was with you, wasn't
Billy
he?
Bold was with us. He kept us all awake because he was on my watch and he snored so much I couldn't sleep for 3 days.
Right. And at the Fastnet that year?
Fastnet was a typical Fastnet. Nice start, and the end was adrift, and we just floated around for the last day or so off Plymouth.
And then you stayed on in England after
I stayed on in England for 2 years, and during which time I toured Europe quite a bit and went across to watch the America's Cup in 1970 in Newport.
Right. And going back a step, you'd studied architecture and you'd qualified or graduated by then?
Yes, I'd been working for a while and I decided to go overseas and take a break.
Right. But then you were a part of that illustrious group that started the Oz Crew club, weren't you?
Correct, that's right, yes.
So tell us about Oz Crew, what that was.
We did the Admiral's Cup trials in 1971 in England, and I think there were 18 boats built for the trials, just for the three.
This was to get into the English
team, the 3 spots.
And you were sailing with?
I was sailing with a boat called Mersey Oyster, a new Dick Carter design, and Dick Carter had won the Fastnet race the year before with Red Rooster, so we thought we were in with a good chance. But the interesting thing was that out of the 18 boats, 7 or 8 of them had an Australian on board. And so Peter Dawn, who I was sharing a flat with, we got together and we decided we'd form a thing called Oz Crew. So we had a badge and we had a party at Cowes every year thereafter, which became quite famous. And it was, it was hard to get into. It was so popular at Spencer's Rigging Loft. And
the Oz Crew badge, I think, was Australia upside down.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes. And it's still going. They still have get-togethers now.
Yeah. Well, Peter Doran, there's another character from Australia who went over with Bellandra when they won the Cup in '67 and stayed there.
He stayed there.
Yeah. Okay, so we're in England. We missed out on the British team.
Missed out on the English team, although our sister ship was a Dutch boat, and it did terribly well. Won a race in the Solent, and came quite high up in the Fastnet race.
And did you do the Fastnet of that year, 71?
We did the Fastnet that year, and Ragamuffin won it.
That's right, yeah. Hard run back from the rock.
Back,
yeah. So then you ventured back to Sydney?
Back to Sydney, and came back in November, came back to the club again and got a ride to Hobart with Zilvergeest 2.
Right. And that was, what sort of boat?
That was designed by Barry Finch, who was an architect. It had been built as a boat called Maid Rosalind.
That's right, yeah.
And it passed it on from architect to architect. And we had quite a team on that called, we had Barry Valance, we had Speedy and Roy. Right. Roy was also known as Ping Ping. His idea of trimming a headsail was to wind it until the sheets went ping, ping.
Yes. Well, those characters, yeah, you never forget them. But then you took a step up. I think you joined the crew of past Commodore Bill Saltus's
new... That's right, on Meltemi.
New Sparkman and Stevens design that was meant to be the be-all and end-all.
Yeah. But we had some stiff competition that year and we didn't make the team.
Yes.
But we learned a lot about sailing those bigger boats. It was very interesting, very good.
But the year you went to Hobart, I think, on Meltemi, you had a very mixed crew of some real young guys, including yourself, and characters like Nookie Tyndall and Billy Wright and Scruffy O'Neill. But you had some old hands in Trig Halverson and Peter Kurtz.
And Peter Kurtz. Yeah. And we got a spinnaker wrapped off Shooting Island. And Peter Kurtz said, I'll go up and untangle it. And I said, no, you won't. You're too old for that. So I went up. By golly, I won't do that again now.
And what was Meltemi like?
It was a lovely boat in light air. Lovely boat. It was designed for the Mediterranean, I believe. Over 15 knots upwind, it just didn't compete with the other Sparkman and Stevens boats or the Miller boats.
Mm. And Bill Saltus, another character from the CYCA?
Bill's another character, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Still going, and he still sails of a Wednesday, I see.
I think he says he's given up sailing, I heard yesterday.
Oh, right, well, that was just recently, wasn't it?
Just recently, yeah.
But it's someone that's done a lot for this club as Commodore.
Absolutely, and he instigated the America's Cup, the Admiral's Cup.
Yes, indeed, with Norman Ridge and Trig Halverson. So then you moved on, I think, to another Sparkman Stevens boat, the heavy Queequeg.
The Queequeg.
Yes.
Queequeg was the boat that beat us in the year before, so I was stepping up a notch, I thought. And it was a lovely boat to sail, but it was really a cruising layout. But it was a very nice yacht, and we had a great time with Bill Fesk navigating and Ricky Dowling owning, and a good team. And we gave it a good run in the Hobart race. Good run.
Well, then the next big step was a big one up to the 74 Hobart race when Peter Kurtz asked you to join the crew of Love and War. Tell us about that race where victory was Love and War's.
Well, that was a very interesting race. That was the year that Bumblebee was launched, and Bumblebee won everything. We just hit the water and won every race, and we thought, oh gosh, we haven't got a chance here. This is going to be, we're not going to make the team, we're not going to do anything. But Trig Halverson, we were sailing the boat okay, but Trig Halverson, Magnus Halverson, sorry, the navigator, navigated us brilliantly to Hobart. And I just remember coming up in the last morning, seeing the Miller boats in front of us, quite close to us, and we gained a huge amount by going offshore and beat Bumblebee into third place, I think, yes. So that was an absolute winner for us. We won the Hobart race. We couldn't believe our luck. We thought, this is fantastic. I've still got the poster, actually, which says, in the Mercury, Love and War wins Yacht Classic.
Yeah.
Still got the poster from the newspaper.
And it's always a big thrill, well, to win any race, but to win your own, like, Australian championship race, it's a great thing, isn't it?
Oh, that was the highlight. Yeah. It was absolutely fantastic.
But also in the crew, Kurtz had organised the Olympic gold medalists from the star class from Munich, John Anderson and David Forbes, to join the crew.
We had a dream crew really with those two guys, plus Magnus Halverson, plus Peter Kurtz, who was a wonderful skipper, and those guys taught me all I know about sailing. I think John Anderson and David Forbes, they were absolute mentors. They were fantastic.
And then I think just after the boat got back to Sydney to compete in the Admiral's Cup trials, there was a bit of disaster struck the boat.
Wouldn't believe it. The first race we did after we came back was a 15-knot sou'easter, bumpy sea. We went out, we weren't sailing particularly well. I don't think we were a bit sort of...
Hungover from Hobart still, 3 weeks later.
Yeah, that's right, still. And up the second beat, halfway up the second beat, suddenly the mast came down and the boom landed on top of one of the crew, and Kurtz said to him sympathetically, you better go down and lie down below. So that was the end of that. I mean, that mast could have come down just going up the Derwent River on the last leg of the Hobart race. We were very lucky.
So I guess then it was a tight rush to get ready for the Admiral's Cup trials to select the Australian team.
We got a new mast, quite with a huge amount of effort, and I think it was a better mast than the old one. So the boat, I think, was sailing better. And we surprised ourselves, and I think everybody else, by winning the Admiral's Cup selection trials. We were very, very pleased, very pleased.
And then off to England for the Cup. Now tell us about that. That was a bit of a disaster for Australia, wasn't it, really?
What had happened was that in that period, last 2 years, the design of yachts overseas had jumped ahead by quite a bit. Ron Holland, who hadn't been heard of before, was suddenly designing yachts, and Love and War was actually a 2-year-old design at that stage. And we went over there thinking we were sort of, the latest sort of thing in the water, and the Germans had boats a bit like ours, but much more developed, and we faced some really hard competition, particularly in the light air. So we thought we didn't do well at Cowes. We were a bit under-winched. We had trouble in the big fleet tacking off Cowes Green. But we thought when we get offshore, we'll beat them. We didn't. we struggled all the way, and it was a light finish to the Fastnet race, so we didn't do well, and the team didn't do well at all.
Well, I think that was the year that they had to bring in a time limit, because the second inshore race, which was sailed in the Solent, a sort of a 30-miler took over almost 12 hours to complete.
It was terrible, absolutely terrible. Yeah. Yes.
Boats were anchored for hours and hours with just no wind, and there was no time limit, so the race kept going.
I think it was midnight or something like that. Yeah.
And the Fastnet, well, as you said, it was a light weather race really, and again it didn't favour the Australian team, did it?
Not at all.
No. So then back to Sydney then? And
back to Sydney, yes, again. Yeah.
Still working in
absolutely,
your own architectural business?
Yeah, I started to practice when I came back, and I was working pretty hard at that stage.
Yeah. And then the Admiral's Cup called again in '77, and Sir James Hardy knocked on your door and said, "Let's go sailing."
Let's go again. Yeah. So that was a terrific. That was a boat that was very temperamental.
Runaway was
called. Yeah. It did some things very well and some things not so well, and we just scraped into the team, and we went to England, and once again we suffered. I think the boats were a generation better than we were again. Every 2 years the competition was fantastic, and the designs of the boats and the sails and the technology of the rigs and everything improved so much. We were being left behind in Australia.
And I think, as you alluded to, I mean, the design parameters were changing. You know, Bruce Farr, Ron Holland and Doug Peterson were coming to the fore then. Their boats were a lot lighter construction. There were three-quarter rigs starting to develop, and we were probably, 12 months behind there, weren't we, in our design boats and
I think we were
equipment.
probably a whole 2 years behind each time we went there.
And Runaway, what was that boat? As you said, it had some good points.
It was an
Didn't have-
Alan Blackburn design, built in aluminium by Sid Fisher's Aquacraft. It was probably the fastest yacht in the world at one little particular point of sailing. We could keep up with Imp, which was the best yacht that year. We could sail with them to our rating at 60 degrees apparent and about 8 knots of wind. It was a fantastic yacht. But the rest of the time it really struggled.
Yeah. I think you got those conditions in the Channel race, and
We did.
we finished fifth overall.
Yeah, we were very pleased with ourselves.
If the race had stopped.
Came from last at the rounding market and fifth at the end.
Yeah, yeah. So then you were back to Australia, and again Peter Kurtz came calling for 78 Hobart race.
78 Hobart race. We had a reprise, and we had at that stage we had a wonderful sort of competitor in the old Ragamuffin, sailed by Graham Freeman, and we sort of watched each other before the races, and every race we went out and sort of competed against them, and it was very touch and go. But he had the edge on us most of the time. But in that Hobart race, we did something right, and I remember we came into Storm Bay. We could see them ahead of us, and they rated a bit higher than us. I actually climbed up to the cross trees, which I couldn't do now, and said, "There they are, I can spot them." So Kurtzy said, "We'll just go over there and dump ourselves next to them because we rate lower," which was the right thing. Turned out to be the right thing to do. We were both becalmed, but when the breeze came in, we followed them in, and we won the race. It was a fantastic second win.
Two victories in 4 years was pretty special.
Yes,
yeah.
indeed.
And I know just recently there was 40-year reunion for the Love and War crew, and you all went out on Love and War, which was a nice touch, wasn't it?
Fantastic.
Minus Peter Kurtz,
Yeah,
who we
Peter Kurtz.
still think fondly of. So then 79, you took a big step. You joined a British boat.
Yes, indeed. I was invited to sort of be the local expert, so-called, on a boat called Blizzard, which was the latest thing from Frere's design and built in England. Beautiful boat.
And she'd stormed into the British Admirals Cup team.
Absolutely.
She won
yes,
everything.
Won everything, yeah, fantastic. And we did the Hobart race. We did the series out here. It was very good fun. A lovely bunch of guys, and I went to all the parties which the Poms had. They were terrific. And that was the worst result I've ever had in a Hobart race. We came 100th.
Right. First 1 year, 100th the next. Yeah. But she was an outstanding boat. I mean, Dick Deaver, I think, from America,
Dick Deaver came
top
up,
American yachtsman, was on
there
board.
No expense spared. It was, it was a great campaign, and it just didn't suit the boat at all.
No, it looked as though the Maxis would clean up, and then they got clobbered by the little boats who came storming home. So
Exactly
the middle-sized boats, like Blizzard, got nowhere, obviously.
Nowhere.
So the tiny screw loose one, I think.
That's right, yes.
One of the smallest winners ever.
Which I'd sailed in the year before, in the half-ton cup.
Yes, yeah.
Terrible result.
Yeah. So obviously sailing was still very much in your blood, and you kept sailing out of the club then, out of the CYC.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I sail now. I sail twice a week.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah. But we keep going back to Admirals Cups because I know you enjoyed that so much being in England, and then 81 you did the trials with Peter Kurtz on Once More Dear Friends, and
correct, yes.
missed out on the
We
team.
didn't make it.
But sorry, I'll go back 2 years. We did on Marlou with Nick Gertis.
Yes, and we didn't.
79.
That was a terrible piece. That was a wonderful yacht, and we just couldn't get it together. We won the first trial race, came second in the second trial race, and so on.
Yes, downhill from there. But I think it was a boat that was very under-rigged because in the breeze she was a rocket ship, and in light air it really struggled.
Really struggled in light air, yes. But it was in a bit of breeze, it was a wonderful yacht.
Yes, yeah.
Doug Peterson design again.
Yeah. Well, then 83 you were back in England on Bondi Tram.
Bondi Tram with Dennis O'Neill, yeah.
Yeah.
And we had a good series, but that was the beginning of. We were one of the last masthead rigged boats in that series. Everyone else was three-quarter rigged, and we were just a bit outclassed again.
But that was a pretty good series. Hitchhiker, Once More Dear Friends, and Bondi Tram with the
Hitchhiker we never able to beat Hitchhiker.
team.
enough.
She was a super boat, wasn't she?
Wonderful boat.
Yeah.
Same design apparently, but just always faster.
Yeah. And what about, how did you see the Admirals Cup then? I mean, 18 or 19 teams, they were wonderful times, weren't they?
They were wonderful times, but that was the beginning of the end for the inshore races. They decided to start the races out in Christchurch Bay, and we discovered you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to Christchurch Bay to have the race. And I think that was a terrible mistake by the Englishmen to try and even out the thing, because part of the fun of doing the Admiral's Cup was battling the tides in the Solent. And we went up to Christchurch Bay, it was the middle of nowhere, left at 4:30 in the morning, got home at 8 at night. We were exhausted, and it wasn't much of a race.
Yes,
very disappointing.
Took a lot of the fun away from it.
It
I
did,
think
yeah.
the Solent, although it was a challenging place to sail, it had a mystique about it, didn't it? Really.
Absolutely, that was the Admiral's Cup, the Fastnet race, and the racing in the Solent. And that, from then on, they got rid of the Solent races and shortened the Fastnet race to the Wolf Rock race eventually.
Yeah, yeah. And getting back to the Hobart, you had line honours one year.
Had line honours one year with Sid Fisher in the ex Bumblebee, then Ragamuffin. That was quite a race. I remember we didn't actually finish first, but because Rothmans was penalised an hour and 50 minutes and we beat them by whatever. But I remember we had a crew of 25 people, and I remember going to the bar at some pub at some stage after the race and saying to a guy, "Oh yeah, what race did you go down on?" He said, "I went down in Ragamuffin." I was down the back and he was up the front. We never mixed.
Yeah. So, Michael, how do you've 27 Hobart races for 2 wins and a line honours victory and a lot of Admiral's Cups. How do you see the sport today of ocean racing and Hobart race? How do you see? It's hard to compare generations, but what do you think of the sport today?
Well, it's totally changed. We used to look forward to those races every month down to the Bird Island or up to Cabbage Tree. Nowadays, people just want to get it over with, really. We thought those races were fantastic. We look forward to them. People now just want to get the calendar as short as possible and to have a point score attached to it. And I think because the boats are so uncomfortable, you spend all your time sitting on the rail now, it's taken away a lot of the fun of doing longer races. And to say nothing of which, the boats are much less comfortable to sail on. The motion of them is terrible, and the accommodation is, it's very Spartan. It takes us back to the Zilvergeest days, really.
What about foiling?
Look, it leaves me cold, I'm sorry to say. The America's Cup to me is those big boats roaring around the place with, doing manoeuvres and dial-ups at the start and all that sort of stuff. That's really what the America's Cup's about, not this business of foiling and stuff. The technology is great, do it somewhere else.
Yeah. And canting keels?
Well, I'm just about to start sailing on a boat with a canting keel, so I'll let you know about that soon.
But you're still actively sailing at the moment?
Yeah, twice a week. Look forward to it,
Yeah, that's great.
Sort of semi-retired apart from that.
Right, and the last couple of years you've been into the Mediterranean on classic yachts?
Yes, we did the two regattas at Saint-Tropez and Cannes the last 2 years, and they're fabulous. The boats over there have to be seen to be believed. I've done a couple of Antigua race weeks and the Caribbean 600 as well, so I've been, and a transatlantic race.
And that Caribbean 600 seems to be gathering momentum. What's that like?
That's a fantastic race. When it started it's 600 miles long, wonderful course around a lot of islands, purportedly in 25-degree temperature and steady trade winds. That was the first 2 races. We did the 3rd race and it was no wind at all. And the last race was so strong, boats were retiring right left and centre.
They got blowing the oysters off the rocks,
Absolutely.
I think, most of the time.
In theory, it's a wonderful race to do. And I think it will join the other classic races as a race that people would like to do.
So have you got another Hobart in you?
I don't have any inclination whatsoever to do another Hobart race, Peter.
Right. Well, Michael, thank you for your time. It's been a wonderful career. You must be very proud of what you've achieved in the sport, and continue to go well, and good luck in your Wednesday race this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Peter.